Good evening. Small talk is over. Let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein. For years, the Epstein case has hovered over American politics like a shadow. Not just a scandal, not just a crime story, but something much larger. A network, a web of wealth, influence, and connections that stretched across business, politics, media, and even royalty. It's the kind of story that makes people uneasy, because it raises uncomfortable questions. Who knew what? Who was involved? And how far did the influence go? But perhaps the most unsettling part of the Epstein story isn't just the crimes themselves, it's the people who surrounded him. Powerful people, famous people, people who appeared in photographs, attended parties, flew on private planes, and showed up again and again in the same social circles. And when those connections began resurfacing in public discussion, the reactions were immediate. Some tried to explain them, some tried to distance themselves, and some tried to dismiss the entire topic. At one point, Donald Trump described the Epstein case as something that shouldn't really interest anyone. Pretty boring stuff, he suggested, but the public didn't see it that way, because this story was never just about gossip. It was about power, influence, accountability, and perhaps most importantly, evidence that if you look back at American politics decades ago, there was something almost sacred about photographic evidence. One photograph could change everything. A single image could end a political career overnight. Not because people loved scandal, but because they trusted what they could see. The camera doesn't lie. That idea used to be widely accepted. If a politician was photographed doing something contradictory to what they claimed publicly, the damage could be immediate and irreversible. The image became proof that couldn't easily be explained away. But the political world changed, slowly at first, then dramatically. Over time, a different strategy emerged. When evidence appears, you don't explain it, you challenge it, you question it, you deny it, and if denial isn't enough, you attempt to rewrite the story entirely. Trump has used this strategy repeatedly throughout his political career. If a document surfaces, he questions its authenticity. If a quote resurfaces, he disputes the context. If a narrative becomes inconvenient, he challenges the entire premise. And when public attention returned to his past social connections with Jeffrey Epstein, the same strategy appeared again. Trump confidently stated that he barely knew Epstein, that their relationship was minimal, that the idea of a close connection had been exaggerated. It was delivered with the same tone of certainty that had defined many of his previous public statements. But this time, something unexpected happened. Because the response didn't come from political rivals, it came from late-night television. Inside the historic Ed Sullivan Theater in New York City, host Stephen Colbert was preparing his nightly monologue for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. For years, Colbert had blended humor with political commentary. His audience expected satire, jokes, sharp punchlines, but on this particular night, the tone shifted. When Colbert walked onto the stage, the audience applauded as usual, but instead of launching into a rapid-fire set of jokes, he slowed down. He sat behind his desk, looked directly into the camera, and spoke calmly. "The president wants you to ignore your own eyes," he said. "He wants you to believe the connection never existed." Then he introduced a quote, not from a political opponent, not from a journalist, from Trump himself. In a 2002 interview with New York Magazine, Trump spoke openly about Epstein. "I've known Jeff for 15 years, he said. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with." Then he added something that would later be quoted repeatedly in news coverage. "It's even said he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side." The audience reacted immediately. Some laughed awkwardly, others simply murmured, because the quote complicated something important. If Trump barely knew Epstein, how did he know him for 15 years? How did he describe him as a terrific guy? And why speak so casually about his social life? But Colbert wasn't finished, because the quote was only the beginning. He turned toward the large screen behind him and said something simple. "Tonight, we're not going to rely on commentary. We're going to look at the photographs." The first image appeared. A high-resolution photograph taken at Mar-a-Lago. In the image, Trump stands next to Epstein. Next to them stands Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell. All three appear relaxed, comfortable, smiling. This wasn't a candid background appearance. It wasn't someone walking past a camera. It was a posed photograph taken at a private event, hosted at Trump's own property. The studio audience shifted slightly, some laughed nervously, others simply watched, then another photograph appeared. This one taken at a New York social gathering during the 1990s. Once again, Trump and Epstein stood close together, talking, leaning toward each other, laughing, the kind of body language you see between people who are familiar with one another, not strangers, not casual acquaintances, familiar. Then came another photograph and another. Different events, different years, but the same pattern. Charity galas, social gatherings, private parties. In each image, the distance between the two men was small, sometimes shoulder to shoulder, sometimes leaning toward each other in conversation. By the time the fourth photograph appeared, the room had grown noticeably quieter. Because the images were beginning to tell their own story, no commentary needed. Then Colbert introduced the most recognizable piece of footage, a still frame taken from a widely circulated video filmed in 1992. The video was recorded at a party at Mar-a-Lago. In the footage, Trump and Epstein stand together on a crowded dance floor. They laugh. They gesture toward people across the room. At one point, they appear to be commenting on women passing by. The clip had been public for years. Anyone could watch it online. But when placed side by side with Trump's recent statements, the contrast became striking, because the footage showed two men who appeared completely comfortable with each other, relaxed, social, friendly. Colbert then turned back to the camera and delivered a message that was far more serious than comedic. When a public figure asks you to reject clear evidence, he said, the problem usually isn't the evidence. The audience applauded quietly, not the explosive laughter typical of a late-night show. Something more thoughtful, more reflective, because this moment wasn't really about comedy anymore. It was about memory and history. By the next morning, the segment had spread rapidly across the internet. Clips circulated across social media, news outlets replayed the images, the video resurfaced again. Political commentators debated the meaning. Supporters argued the photographs didn't prove anything beyond casual social interaction. Critics argued they contradicted the narrative that Trump barely knew Epstein. The debate intensified, but one thing remained unchanged. The images themselves. They had been taken years earlier, long before the controversy, long before the denials, long before the political consequences, and that's exactly why they were powerful, because photographs freeze time. They capture moments that speeches cannot erase. They record details that statements cannot rewrite. And once those images exist, they become part of the historical archive. In politics, narratives change constantly, statements evolve, positions shift, but archived evidence doesn't move. It stays exactly where it was recorded, waiting to be rediscovered, waiting to be revisited, and sometimes, waiting to become relevant again years later. That's why moments like this matter. Not because they settle every debate, but because they remind people of something fundamental. Evidence still exists, history still exists, and sometimes the past has a way of reappearing at the most unexpected moments. Because in the end, political messaging moves quickly, narratives shift overnight, but the archive remains, the footage remains, the photographs remain, and the camera remembers, even when people try not to.